He is such an icon, and sometimes when you think about icons, is they can come off as impersonal or elusive, and sort of. Was there any fear or concern during the filmmaking process that writing an article is one thing, you can through your own insight sort of pull out that character, but that he would be too protective of himself, the character wouldn't come across as well as it could?
Oh, I mean, the whole time. I mean, that's a great question because he's so reserved and so protective of what his true self. So he's photographed constantly, but he's just this sort of mask behind those tinted aviator frames and the perfect hair and the tan, of course.
Which he plays up, it seems, though.
Yeah, well, he's playing a part. He's very movie star, Valentino. Yeah. I mean, he doesn't give a second thought to being Valentino. It comes naturally to him. He's been playing the role, as it were, for 50 years, and he does. He puts himself in costume every day. In a certain way. He wears a perfect suit, perfect tie, and everything's perfect. And no one does that anymore. There's no slouching around in a t-shirt and shorts. Okay, so for me as the filmmaker in process, I worried about that a great deal. So we were always trying to figure out how to get to Valentino and crack him and kind of get him to tell us more. And then we gave up, actually, because when we started to see dailies where he's so Valentino all the time, we realized the character of Valentino actually is Valentino being Valentino and not what's underneath it all. You have to infer in a certain way through the little moments we capture where he does kind of break up. So he cries a lot in the movie, and he loses it, and he gets temper tantrums, and that's where you get to see through the behind the curtain, as it were, behind the veil, I think is a better way of putting it. So rather than having the kind of Barbara Walters interview with Valentino, where he breaks down and tells you what his true fears, I realized halfway through this is never going to happen. He doesn't do that. He's too used to being interviewed for 50 years. Also the language barrier in a certain way. I was interviewing him in English, and he has pat stories that he tells in English, and he does not vary from them. If I had been interviewing him in Italian, I really don't think I would have gotten any farther, because I know the stories are the same in Italian. So what we decided to do was use Giancarlo as the window into Valentino's soul. Because Giancarlo's very emotionally complex and is not afraid to talk about love or emotions, and he's much more warm and fuzzy and emotional, overtly emotional. Valentino's covertly emotional, then he cracks and he lets it out in these bursts. So we use Giancarlo as the kind of, as I said, the window into Valentino's soul, and I think it comes across that way. But I was very nervous throughout, because people, being my first film, people kept on saying to me, you've got to get him to give you more, because if you don't see what's underneath the movie, the crafted persona, then you won't have the movie you need. And I was full of fears about that, because he's such a tough nut to crack. And then finally I realized it's okay, we can do it this way, and it's better and it's more real, because to put him under hot lights and try to get him to open up, I think would have been so painful and awkward for the viewer that it would have created, I think, an uncomforting feeling, and we would have failed anyway. So the best we could have done was show us trying to succeed, and I think the audiences would have not reacted well to that. As it is, you're sympathetic to him. You kind of build up some sympathy for him. You go. I think the audiences go through emotions with him and about him. It's like, well, do I like this guy? I mean, is he? Everything seems to be too perfect for him, and then you see there are weaknesses that reveal themselves. So I think he becomes more human at the end, especially through these tantrums he has. And he didn't like, of course, us having those on film. And he'd come up to me and say, I don't want that in the film. I'd say, Valentino, I give him this lecture, director to star, quote unquote. Valentino, you have to be real in this movie. If you don't show real emotion, people will hate you.
That's true.
Because you'll seem like Marie Antoinette. to them, and you have to let me show you as you are, and if you don't, it'll be a disaster for you. Of course, he didn't listen to me at all. And at Venice, during the official press conference, immediately after that big ovation, he said something I thought was very great. He said there were lots of things in this movie that I would prefer not to have been in the film. If I had known what the film was going to be, I would have done very well to avoid them. His exact phrase. But you see me as I am, and I have to accept that. So I thought, you know what, okay, the curtain can come down on the comic opera.
It's amazing. You also get a sense that 50 years of playing the part of Valentino, the part and the man aren't really that far apart.
No, they're the same thing.
Yeah.
The same thing.
I was wondering if you could talk a little about Giancarlo's reaction to the film. He's the one who is the surprising character and the one who you do feel a lot of emotion towards, and you really kind of root for the whole way. And whatever you're rooting for, I'm not sure.
Right. Well, I mean, you're rooting. I think you just connect with him, because this is the thing. It's the universal story. They're the two richest men in Rome, and they dress like people out of La Dolce Vita. It's perfect living, but who would have thought that you could identify with him? And the reason you can identify with him is everyone has a relationship, or wants to have a relationship, or had a relationship, or is in a relationship that is difficult, and you want to please your partner, and he's all about that. And you feel for him. You think, is this fair for Giancarlo? Does Valentino give enough? What does he get out of it? These are universal emotions that anyone can identify with, even though they're giving each other diamond bracelets and wearing, $7,000 suits and being chauffeured around in Daimlers,
From chateau to chateau.
From chateau to chateau, private planes and six bugs in the plane. And yet, they could be anyone at the emotional core of it, which is, I think, why the movie ultimately does work, probably. I mean, I think it's funny. That helps as well. Giancarlo had the same reaction to Valentino. But he was more the front man, too. He was telling me, this is terrible, it has to change, it's evil. I mean, they were going there. They were calling me Judas.
They were getting Italian.
They were getting very Italian, yeah. Judas was... because when you greet in Italian, you kiss on both cheeks. So when I would do that, they would look at me and say Judas.
Right.
So that says it all, I think. But I couldn't tell whether he was playing it up because he needed to convince Valentino that he was on his side and against me, and whether or not he really liked the movie secretly, because the movie puts him in a very good light in that automatically it puts him on an equal footing with Valentino, which he's never been before in any narrative, except for the article I wrote. And I couldn't tell whether this was, from the moment he saw it, he thought, okay, this is good for me. I have a problem with Valentino and I need to fix it, or whether he really was outraged along with Valentino. That's never been completely clear. If you look at the Charlie Rose interview, and I actually wrote a Huffington Post article about this experience, a very shorthand version of it. I've given you many more details, but it was Charlie Rose had us all on and questioned us for an hour about working together, and a lot came out that hadn't before in that show, just about what it was like to make the movie and how we had to deal with each other. And they admitted they didn't like it, and it was very, very cathartic actually to have to do that. And now we're all friends again, and they're thrilled.